Hello scientists of Reddit, what's a scary science fact that the public knows nothing about? Some forms of anesthesia don't numb you to pain, they make you forget that you felt it. Next story. Scientific literature conclusion on Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases in general is that the diseases start decades before the first obvious symptoms and that we need to treat them at this stage. When you exhibit obvious symptoms, it's too late, your brain is already mush. If you get diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 65, you had the disease since your early 40s at least. And you experienced very mild symptoms but didn't notice it. And your brain fought like hell to compensate the deficit. When you get diagnosed, your brain is already very severely damaged and will never recover from the deficit. Next story. If your dog swims in a lake after receiving a spot-on flea treatment, it absolutely decimates the invertebrate population. A large dog swimming in 8 Olympic swimming pools worth of water soon after treatment will leach enough neurotoxin to kill 50% of the lake's invertebrate population within 48 hours. There's some awareness of this, but it's not being taken seriously enough. Edit, I need to add, when I say after I mean relatively soon after, within say a day, to have an effect quite this devastating. The leaching does reduce over the month, but it's still there and the effect of multiple dogs still allows for a terrible buildup of chemicals. Next story. Prions. Misfolded proteins that cause a cascade of protein misfoldings that lead to amyloid plaque buildups, resulting in uncontrollable neurodegeneration that is fatal in 100% of cases within 2 years. There is no cure. We don't understand what causes it. We don't understand the mechanism of the misfolding cascade. We don't even fully understand the structure of the misfolded proteins. It could in theory happen to anyone, at any time, and there's no way to tell until you start showing symptoms, at which point you might have 18 months to live, if you're lucky, the last 6 of which will be intensely unpleasant. Next story. Small asteroids are hard to detect, but can still cause massive damage to towns. Next story. Most of the faults that are capable of causing large earthquakes have never been mapped. Next story. Coronavirus/COVID-19 was not surprising nor unexpected by people working in public health. And it's not the worst case scenario by any means. Ironically, the success of public health has been so dramatic over the past 150 years, that politicians and the general public forget how important it is. And how much authority government officials have in a public health crisis. Next story. Despite what advertising tells you, it's really hard to claim that something is scientifically proven. Why? Proving causality is complicated and expensive. Next story. Only thing stopping genetic manipulation on humans is legislation. Next story. Antibiotics has been abused and misused for so long, that various bacteria strains have started to get resistance to them. What used to be a treatable infection, might soon become deadly because we are unable to treat it with the antibiotics we have today. There is research to try and find other ways to treat antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but until then, please use prescribed antibiotics until they are finished, not until you feel better. If unsued, do not flush them down the toilet or put them in the bin, give it to a pharmacy so they can discard them correctly, and use antibiotics when necessary. Some countries give them willy-nilly while others are more conservative. Next story. If you look up and see an asteroid in the sky, about to hit Earth, you have about 1 second to react. Next story. Everyone knows about scurvy, but the reason it's so terrifying is usually less known. You see, scar tissue is not permanent. The process to build and maintain scar tissue is constantly ongoing. When you become vitamin C deficient, your scar tissue starts being reabsorbed by your body, opening up any and all old wounds. If you have ever had surgery, those internal incisions will open back up. Fortunately, it doesn't take a lot of vitamin C and it's abundant in our food sources, but it's still a little creepy that you could just start falling apart without it. Edit, for your information, too much vitamin C can lead to stomach cancer. Vitamin C is basically citric acid, so eating a ton of acid regularly is bad. Edit 2, citric acid is not vitamin C, but is closely related, and is actually ascorbic acid. Next story. Helium. Fun for party balloons. Everybody likes a squeaky voice. Except helium is a vital component of various high-tech devices such as MRIs. Helium is also light enough that the Earth's gravity cannot contain it. And we are running out. Not today, not tomorrow, but we are frivolously wasting it when we should be jealously hoarding it, and eventually we won't have any left, and a lot of our wonderful technology will suddenly stop working. Next story. There is a gravitational anomaly in space called the Great Attractor, which is pulling everything within the Virgo and Hydra Centaurus superclusters towards it. It lies 150 to 250 million light years from the Milky Way, which itself is being pulled towards it too. The scary part is that relative to us, this anomaly lies within the same plane as our own galaxy, making it very difficult to observe. Essentially, we have almost no concrete idea of what it is. Next story. If you live in the Netherlands and your house is older than, let's say, 100 years and you have not renovated your plumbing, chances are fairly high that you can get lead poisoning. It is impossible for water treatment companies to pinpoint where they are and how many, and many building plans do not include the plumbing schematics, so check your pipes for lead. They can do harm, especially to children. Next story. The entire explosive output from Little Boy, the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima, came from just over half a gram of matter being converted into energy. The mass of a butterfly exploding with the force of 15,000 tons of TNT. Next story. Cancer geneticist here. Most cases of cancer that are sequenced generally just denote the prognosis or how long a patient has to live, rather than treatment options. People always say let's cure cancer, however this simplifies cancer as though it is only one disease. It's far more complicated than that. I studied at one of the largest cancer hospitals in the world where the motto is to make cancer history, but the only obtainable goal is to make it chronic. We study and research as much as possible, but every cancer requires different research, and unfortunately the powers that be often prohibit funding and proficient research. It's work I am passionate about, but also a broken system that is infuriating to work in. Next story. We keep our dangerous bacteria species in a college campus fridge. Protected by one single lock. With one power cord. Next story. During World War II, when America was working on the first nuclear bombs, they hadn't finalized the maths on whether or not a nuclear explosion would cause an ongoing reaction with the atmosphere, thereby igniting it and eradicating Earth. Next story. There is a forest of trees that are all genetically identical and connected at the roots and is considered the largest organism on Earth. I'm pretty sure it was the inspiration behind Eva in Avatar. Next story. In the UK, about 17% of people have fetal alcohol syndrome, Maguire et al., 1992. As much as 17% of us are developmentally disabled simply because, prior to the late 90s, a large proportion of British mothers drank during pregnancy, 41%. Thankfully the prevalence rate has been falling fast since the late 90s when all this research was published, but it's terrifying to see how much of an effect FOST is having on society. Next story. A repeat of an earlier post, but damn does it fit so well. The original nuclear bombs leveled the cities they detonated over, yet are considered puny by today's standards. The most powerful nuclear bomb ever created, the Tsar Bomba, had an explosive yield 3,000 times more powerful than the original nuclear bombs, and its power was calculated to be more than 10 times the combined power of every single munition used in World War II. That includes every bullet fired, every grenade thrown, every artillery shell fired, every bomb dropped, and of course, the 2 nuclear bombs dropped. It was detonated 4 kilometers from the ground over the remote Severny Island, yet still completely destroyed towns within a couple hundred kilometers of the blast and broke windows as far away as Copenhagen, Denmark. The shockwave from the blast circled the globe 9 times. The plane that dropped it was given a 50-50 chance of survival. Yet, the bomb was originally designed to be twice as powerful. Next story. The human genome is riddled with mutations. Some were passed down from your parents, some occur during DNA replication, and others as a result of DNA damage from the environment, smoking, UV light, etc. Most of these mutations are harmless. Some will be repaired, some won't. But others will be in cancer suppressor genes or oncogenes. In fact, you may have cancerous cells growing in your body right now. Next story. The Cascadia Subduction Zone, CSZ, runs off the coast of Northern California to southern Canada and ruptures about every 250 to 350 years. We know this from the geologic record. The last rupture was in January 1700, and there are written records from Japan of a tsunami that resulted from the earthquake on the other side of the Pacific. This zone is still active and is likely to rupture in the next 100 years, resulting in a Mag 9+ earthquake that impacts the west coast from northern Cali to southern Canada. Edit. These massive earthquakes along subduction zones are called megathrust earthquakes.